Welcome back to Tipping Point, weeknights at 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on One America News. This segment's Tipping Point. ISIS continues to force their poisonous message on people around the world. Take a look.
It is calling on people around the world to carry out jihad right where they are. Whatever they can do, take up a gun, make a bomb, and carry out terror attacks. Pure lone wolves, as we've heard that term so often. But we've also seen ISIS direct and supply and train. We saw that in Paris. Also suicide attacks in Beirut. 2009, the Fort Hood attack inspired, it was believed, by Anwar al-Awlaki, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. In Garland, Texas, a shooting at a convention for cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, that believed inspired by, possibly even directed by, ISIS. And then, of course, San Bernardino, believed to be inspired by ISIS as well.
But today, an ISIS operative was reportedly captured by U.S. Special Forces. Much of this operation will remain classified, but what we know is an elite targeting force of the United States military reportedly conducted this operation, captured a suspected ISIS operative, and are now interrogating him at an unspecified location. Troops in northern Iraq are also trying to get their hands on laptops, cell phones, anything that was left behind by ISIS to help them lead to more raids like this one against the Islamic State. Joining me now is Director of Threat Information for the Center for Security Policy, Kyle Shideler. Kyle, thanks for being here.
Liz, always a pleasure.
Now, you're coming to us from CPAC. It looks like a great day there. But this reported capture of an ISIS operative, Kyle, is this a big deal?
It's a big deal. We've seen a couple of raids like this. You may recall last year there was the raid where the U.S. operatives killed a guy named Abu Sayyaf and captured his wife, Sayyaf, and they brought her to the Kurds to interrogate. So this is a good deal. You know, we have an operative now. We can talk. They'll be looking first for targeting information for new raids against additional Islamic State operatives. And then after that, they'll expand into more details about how the organization works, who's in charge, what the inner workings are, how they're funded, and so forth. So the interrogation should span for, if it's done properly, weeks, months, even potentially years.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, to walk us through what the interrogation would be like. Not necessarily the techniques. I know some of those are best not to be talked about so that our enemy can't prepare to handle that. But walk us through what they would be looking for first, whether they're looking for things that would be immediately in danger for America and for our allies, whether they're looking for bigger picture things. What is their immediate goal?
Well, first they're going to want to figure out the operative's network, who he knows, who he has access to. They can get some of that from laptops, some of that from cell phones, and some of that from just asking him some pretty hard questions. But those guys will be immediate targets. As soon as they know that this operative has been abducted by U.S. forces, they're going to go into hiding or alter their behavior. So you're going to want to try to take those guys out as quickly as you can. Next up, you're going to try to work your way up the chain, figure out what else he knows about the way the organization works. And then from there, you can span out to broader targets like long-term strategic goals. Of course, always a hot question is, do you know anything about foreign operations, operations against the United States, operations against Europe? Depending on who this operative is, what his function is within the organization, there may be a treasure trove there, or he may be somebody who operates primarily in Iraq or Syria. We'll see about that as things unfurl.
So this is a different type of situation than from when America or our allies kill an individual high-up operative within ISIS, and that individual is then easily replaced by someone who shares their ideology. The fact that they captured him it's not really about whether they can replace him, it's about the information they can get from him.
Right. It's about how much of his network you can disrupt before it's replaced. This has been part of the problem with the Obama administration's desire to see Gitmo shut. That has left us with really no place to do long-term detention and long-term interrogation. As a result, we've shifted primarily to a system of targeting, primarily by drone. That leaves with a dead ISIS operative or a dead al-Qaeda operative, but it doesn't provide you with any intelligence capability. So it's good news that we're back in the business of capturing terrorists, asking them hard questions, and trying to disrupt their network.
Is this an indication that the administration might be focusing more on defeating the ideology rather than just taking down a specific terrorist group that can then reform once they've been destroyed?
I wish that was the case. I'm inclined to doubt it. the Obama administration has remained focused on the Islamic State as the primary threat rather than dealing with the larger ideological threat posed by the global jihad movement, Al-Qaeda, and even the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamist organizations. So they tend to have a very, very narrow focus. I think that's a mistake. Hopefully they'll change their view on that, but I'm not inclined to believe so.
All right, Kyle, I mentioned before you're coming to us from CPAC. So let's talk national security at CPAC. What kind of discussions do you expect to hear from a conservative standpoint, from a practical standpoint, related to our national security issues?
Well, CPAC has had a number of really great panels this year focusing on the threat posed by radical Islam. There was a panel discussion by one of my bosses, Jim Hansen, at the Center for Security Policy, and Ayana Hirsi Ali, herself a former Muslim who's well equipped to discuss the issue of the ideology. And so it looks like within the conservative movement there's generally a bigger desire to see the U.S. expand this to an ideological conflict. Right now we haven't done that. We're focused primarily on terrorist organizations here, a terrorist organization there. But I think at least the conservative candidates are aware that there's a bigger threat. It's an ideological threat, and we need an approach that's more similar to Reagan's approach against the Soviet Union, to take them on in a war of ideas, in a war of ideologies, and to win it.
And what about the people there, not just... What about the people there, not just the candidates speaking? Are people feeling very strongly about prioritizing national security, those who are attending?
I'm getting the sense that there's a strong sense among the American people, at least here at CPAC, amongst the conservative people, that we need to prioritize national security. I think people recognize that. Certainly after San Bernardino, that woke up a lot of people to the realization that jihad is something that can come to our shores at any moment. It's not something that is just for Syria or just for Iraq, and therefore we can turn our heads and ignore it and hope that it leaves us alone. So I think that incident woke up a lot of people to the realization of the threat that we're facing, and hopefully they'll be looking for candidates in the upcoming election that are looking to address that.
Right, and I think our Congress is starting to address it or recognize it in a certain sense at least. There's a bill in Congress right now that would designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist group, something that hasn't been done in the United States before. Kyle, I think that's kind of a big deal too.
It's a huge deal. The bill passed the Judiciary Committee on a party line vote, which isn't too terribly surprising. But what was positive was the chairman, Representative Goodlatte, actually quoted from the explanatory memorandum of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood when he talked about the Brotherhood's goal of bringing a grand jihad against Western civilization. So there's sort of a waking up in a Congress of the wider ideological threat posed by the Muslim Brotherhood. Of course, it's opposed. The bill's opposed by the Obama administration and by the Democrats in Congress. In particular, Minority Leader John Conyers took a very strong stance on it, against it, in the committee hearing. But it did pass, so it'll move forward. I'm not sure how far it will go. That's something we'll have to see. Of course, under the current administration, I don't see much chance of it passing. But if we can make a large enough noise, if people talk to their congressmen and say that this is something that they should be doing, I think we can begin to get some movement towards seeing the Brotherhood listed. Now, the bill would either list the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, if the State Department does so, or alternatively force the State Department to address why they refuse to do so if they believe that the Brotherhood does not meet the criteria. So that would give Congress an opportunity then to amend the terror list in such a way that the Brotherhood would fit under the designation and force the State Department.
There's really no excuse. There's really no excuse for them not to be able. There's really no excuse for them to justify not putting them on the terror list. They're tied to radical jihad, like you said. They have a grand plan to bring that to America. They're tied to terrorist groups like Hamas and Al Qaeda. I cannot imagine what kind of justification would work in order for them not to be on the list. I can't believe they're not already on there. Kyle, we are out of time for the segment today, but I appreciate you coming on. It's great to hear your input on these issues.